I've been in the entertainment field almost my entire life, and I am well experienced in pretty much every aspect of what it means to be a musician. And with that comes a whole lot of bad scenarios, crappy people, bad deals, bad businessmen and women. And so today we're gonna talk about horror stories from the music industry. Hi guys, I'm Miss Crystal. I'm an entertainment attorney, public speaker, and author of How to Keep Your Dukes Up in the Music Business. I'm the owner of Dukes Up Records, and most importantly, I'm an independent musician. And if you guys are looking for more horror stories from my personal experience, you can check those out in my brand new book. It's How to Keep Your Dukes Up in the Music Business, which is available on Amazon in 3 different formats. We have the physical copies, Kindle, and then Audible, so I can just read you my book. Personally, I love hearing books read to me. So, story number 1. This story was inspired by a call that I had with one of my clients today, because one of my suggestions that I had as far as a music collaboration was to make sure that as the step 1, you should always be doing a contract with your collaborator to make sure there's no confusion or disputes that happen down the line. And in response, the client just had oh, we've been friends our entire lives, it'll be totally fine. And while I definitely understand that, and there's trust and loyalty that's been built over time, here's the story. A different client of mine who had been best friends with someone for well over 26 years. So there was a long history of trust and loyalty and good memories. And so it was the same kind of deal, a handshake one. So the parties never put anything in writing, and the agreement was essentially that the friend would go and hustle. They had a business venture and they were gonna make a ton of money, and all our client needed to do was invest. And so part of the investment was, here's the money, I don't really have anything to contribute, so I trust you to do what you're saying you can do. And what ended up happening is that all of a sudden, quite a bit of that money disappeared. And there was no accounting for what happened. The intended purpose of the money never really came to fruition. There was a lot of misrepresentations that came out thereafter, and our client just had no idea any of this was happening. And so here we are now, in some instances, years after the wrongdoing happens, and so we now need to try to claw back and figure out what happened and prove this and prove that, and there's no contract. And so, my word of advice is it doesn't matter who it is. If it's your mom, if it's your friend, or if it's a complete stranger. Always make sure you have everything in writing, because it gives you a recourse. It gives you something to point to when someone's not holding up their end of the bargain, they're not following through, they're not doing what they said they were going to. And don't be in that position to where now you've lost so much money and time and goodwill. And, unfortunately things happen. So when they happen, be in the best position possible. Have your contracts, have discussed all of these things. And so now, when you call me up, we're gonna take them to court, and it makes it a lot easier, rather than trying to figure out what happened and piecing something together that otherwise could have just been put into a contract. And in the instance that no dispute arises, I'll tell you what, more likely than not, it was because you actually took the time to have these discussions up front. You have to talk about this stuff if you're gonna put it into a contract. If you're not writing anything down or putting it into a contract, of course you're not gonna talk about things in the future because you're not thinking about it. And either way, you got the contract, maybe it cost you something, trust me, it costs you a whole lot less to get the contract than to pay to deal with the dispute down the line. My second horror story is actually my own, and this has to do with I signed with a company because this was essentially kind of a hybrid label deal. And so it was a newer company with wealthy executives and business people, and they believed in me. And it was hugely awesome to receive the offer that I did because I was so young, and they offered me $100,000. Amazing. And a step further is that I even got to negotiate my own deal. Because I was able to do all those things, I felt very comfortable with the terms. They really weren't being hard-nosed about anything. I was able to make adjustments. And of course, for $100,000 with what I perceived to be no strings attached, awesome. So I signed that deal, and what ended up happening is that there really was the best of intentions. These were business executives, but they weren't people within the industry. That was the huge missing piece in this relationship. So now they had a pop artist who was very active, always hustling, always doing things, but they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to basically further develop, how to pitch, how to really act like a record label and a manager to move the project along. Now, being a musician at that stage, even from there to now, my focus has always been the same thing. It's about making art, it's about performing, it's about connecting with my fans. And so because I wasn't getting the help that I wanted to be able to really move forward, it caused an incredible amount of frustration. Because all of a sudden now, it was almost like this company that had offered such an amazing deal was holding me back. And so eventually it just got to a point where I had to terminate. Now, of course, understanding your contracts, reading your contracts, and knowing how to get out is so important because I already knew that ahead of time. So because of that, I was able to kind of find the way out of the contract. I terminated, and that was the end of the relationship, and I was able to move on. And that's not the case for all musicians. Some people get tied into contracts and they cannot get out, even if it's a bad deal or they don't like the partner that they're working with. So for horror story number 2, I guess the moral is just to make sure that once again, even if the deal looks amazing and you're excited, make sure that the people that you're signing with can actually do something for you and to move your career along. And to just reiterate the point for good form, because I'm the entertainment attorney here, make sure you know not just how you get into the contract, how long it goes for, but more importantly, your termination provision. How do you get out of the contract if something goes awry? My next music business horror story has to do with a record label. And the record label had essentially a couple people as their top tier team. And one of these people was in charge of quite a bit. So everything from, accounting to graphic designing to website development, product development, merchandise for artists. This person really had a stake in everything that was happening with the record label. Well, this person had been a part of the record label for so many years, and so there was a good relationship, but at some point the relationship soured. And up until that point, there had been no agreement by the parties. So just like I said in the last example, this is where things start going awry, because when a dispute happens, you can't point to what the parties agreed to via the four corners of the contract. So of course, in this instance, this is a very profitable business. There's been a huge amount of money into the business as well as this particular staff member, and then things just explode. Now, in this case, there was a challenge now about the ownership of the intellectual property. So if the staff member is now alleging, I own everything because I am a contractor, so they say, I didn't assign you my IP, I still have my copyright, you can't use anything that I developed for the record label. Well, that's a really tricky situation to navigate. Now, of course, we alleged this was absolutely incorrect, and without getting into the actual copyright argument, nonetheless, what happened is that this got pushed into a court of law. As soon as we get into a court of law and we're dealing with a lawsuit, we're dealing with judges and juries and that kind of thing, it gets incredibly expensive. It takes a long time, especially if you are dealing with an intellectual property issue, because that gets kicked up to federal court. And federal court is just generally a little bit slower. So for all those reasons now, the client is spending an incredible amount of money litigating the case, trying to get all of that intellectual property assigned to the company and declared to be owned by the company, but it's just an incredible, in my opinion, waste of time, waste of money, and all of that could have been avoided if there was a clear contract up front from the get-go. And even if that costs, let's say, the company $500, that would be a whole lot less than what they're having to pay now to litigate and to try to get the rights to their intellectual property. So, moral of the story is, once again, make sure that you get your contract signed upfront and have these difficult conversations with your employees, your contractors, your collaborators, whoever it is, because the more that you have in the contract, the more clarity you have as to the relationship, who has the power, how you get out of the agreement, again, to the termination provision, and all of this is going to better protect you so you don't have to deal with these massive headaches down the road when you should otherwise just be focusing on development, expansion, and brand recognition. Don't forget to come say hi on social media because why not? I love seeing you guys, particularly on Instagram because that's where I am most active. And then also TikTok because we are all on this TikTok journey together on figuring it out and trying to grow our music and awareness with our fans. So wherever you come say hi, make sure you do. It's been amazing to meet you guys. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on your bell notifications so you don't miss another video from your new favorite redhead, and I will see you guys on the next one. I'm Miss Crystal. Bye.